Thinking about becoming a full-time artist is a dream that lingers in the back of many people's minds while they sneak in studio hours around the day job, late at night, or throughout a weekend. And my assumption is that whenever any of us are dreaming about any kind of change, we mostly think that if we took this leap, if we didn't have to be bothered with showing up to an office for someone else Monday through Friday, we'd have more time to do the thing that we love, to make. More time using our hands and less time at a computer screen. More time to explore and create and experiment, and maybe even take a long workshop or residency. Surely, if we didn't have to deal with spending 40 hours of our week somewhere else, we could get a good night's sleep, implement all of those healthy best practices we know we should be doing but don't have the energy for, and generally just not be pulled in so many directions, right? But is that what the change is really like? Is selling your work after you do take that leap to be a full-time artist the same as selling your work when it's a side hustle? Literally speaking, of course, but I'm also asking that question in the sense of, does it feel the same to sell your work as a full-time artist as compared to a side hustler? What really changes when this craft becomes the full-time gig? How do you allow yourself to keep exploring new creative interests while also trying to make sure you can still buy your groceries? In other words, as you will soon hear from Rhianon, what do you do when what you did for fun becomes your job? We're going to learn more about that very question right after this quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of The Maker's Playbook. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray Epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray Epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, with a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to The Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikis Kara. Hey, Rhianon. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Now I'm like, I don't know that my accent made it sound correct or not. So I'm going to make you introduce yourself right away so that your name sounds the way it's supposed to instead of in my American version.
No, you got it completely right. Hi, I'm Rhianon. I am a ceramic artist and I make work that's all about happiness, and I absolutely love what I do. I have been the maker of Happy Heart Ceramics for about 4 years now. Just love it because there's something so special about something that I've made becoming an important part of someone's life and the rituals of how they live their lives. And I really believe that the pieces that we make that go into people's lives can bring not just the function, but beauty and meaning with them. So yeah, it's a privilege and a joy to do what I do.
I also feel like this conversation is long overdue because we have been connecting on the internet for 2 years, maybe more, closer to 3,
more.
For sure 2.
I think it might be getting up to 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know how I let this much time pass by, but I'm particularly excited. And we're going to get into all of it about, how some of the changes you've been making with your business and how you present your work and talk about your work that I'm really excited for people to hear about. Although before all of that, I feel like we should both admit what we were saying earlier today or yesterday, that both of us have this subconscious tendency to mirror the person we're talking to. And who knows what accent this interview will be in by the time we're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, we're going to be Milwaukee, Brisbaneite hybrid versions of ourselves.
And as soon as you had written that to me, I was like, oh my God, am I picking up a Wisconsin accent? Like, oh no.
Sorry, I can't tell the difference. You're just American to me.
Well, that's fair. That feels accurate to me. I also am curious now to listen back to past podcast episodes and see if I was like, because it's something I just do and I don't even realize that I'm doing it until someone is listening to me and is like, why do you sound funny? Why do you sound differently? And so now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wonder what the past podcast episodes with people have sounded like.
Yeah. My mum used to say when I was little that when I came home from school, she could always tell who I'd been playing with because I talked like them.
Exactly. Exactly. My parents, when I lived in the UK, we would have kind of a regularly scheduled, well, it was Skype at the time, which can place it in a particular decade for everyone. But on Sunday, my Sunday nights, their Sunday afternoons, we would always have this Skype call and they could tell what coworker or friend I had spent the weekend with or if I had stayed in my flat by myself or not based upon my accent at that point because they were like, you were at Tracy's house all weekend, weren't you? Yep. I like to think that we're making people comfortable.
And I think it's a good quality, yeah, because it shows that you're listening and paying attention and you're kind of sinking in with the person that you're talking to. I think it was, because like many years I was a therapist and I think that was part of how I built rapport with people, not consciously, I didn't do it deliberately, but to kind of moderate the way I spoke to match the way that they spoke.
And that has always been my concern was that it's not deliberate. And I always wondered as soon as it was pointed out to me, like, oh my gosh, does someone think I'm like taking the piss because I'm mimicking them?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not, because I'm sure I even do it with Americans, like with different slang or different accents regionally or whatever. But anyway, enough of that. We should have everybody who, listen all the way through and then tag us with whatever made up accent name you would like to call us at the end of the episode.
See if you can tell us apart by the end of the episode.
I love it. Well, you mentioned your past history as a therapist, so let's kind of start with the 3,000-foot view in terms of however deep down you want to go. I will say I thought I knew most of your story. And in preparation for this, all of a sudden I discovered you used to own a restaurant. There's like so many more things that I feel like I don't know now and I have questions about. So how the heck did you wind up here?
Yeah, I think you were talking on a recent episode about hitting the reset button, and I can really relate to that. I feel like I've had many lives in little segments. When I think about my ceramics career, I still very much feel like a beginner, but at the same time, it feels like what I've done in the past, all these incredibly disparate lives that I've lived have all contributed to making me the artist that I am today and to running a business and to kind of bringing the heart to the work that I do. Okay, 3,000-foot view.
Whichever.
Oh, back. I want to go now.
Oh, I can. I like a long response. So, however you want to take it.
So, when I think about myself as a beginner in ceramics, and it feels all very new. It's only been a few years of making and selling and working out all of this stuff of how to make a living. I then thought, well, hang on a minute. Actually, I started making polymer clay beads and stringing them into necklaces and bracelets when I was 4 and selling them at markets. And, I would go up to old ladies and say, do you have a grandchild who'd like one of these? I made them. And apparently I was good at it. And my parents had creative industry businesses my whole childhood. So my dad made stained glass windows and my mum made everything really, from chocolates to patchwork velvet pants. And one of her businesses was making porcelain wind chimes with Tibetan mantras on them so that, as the wind goes through, the prayers go out into the breeze. And so then I, as a teenager, started making porcelain wind chimes using leaves and leaf prints and wholesaling them through her channel. So I kind of did it all before I even knew what I was doing, and then decided, no, I have to save the world and make the world a better place. So then I worked really, really hard at that, and I did a degree in psychology, but I've always loved art and felt the incredible benefits of art. So I then did a master's of art therapy and became an art therapist, which I did for about 10 years, and then hit the point where I was pretty burnt out. And I'd always worked kind of at the front line of the hard stuff. I didn't want to work with the worried well who could afford to pay lots of money. I was always working in government funded services. So I was working with, mums on methadone and, with sexual assault and all of that kind of chewy stuff. And that got in my head after 10 years. So then I decided, why don't I just feed people? Because feeding people is a really nice way of looking after people and creating a therapeutic environment for people to spend time in. So I impulsively bought a restaurant, and yeah, it was mad. And then I definitely found out what it was like to work really, really hard for no money at all.
I'm pretty sure the profit margin on restaurants is even smaller than pottery.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you make any money at all, you're part of the 1%. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no way out. Once you've started something like that, I had 20 staff relying on me. I was in it, both feet, learning how to do accounts, learning how to market, learning how to do all of it. It was mad. Those skills I am so glad I have now. But would I go back to that time? Absolutely not. After 2 years, I sold the business and ran off to be an aid worker. No, I'm going to go back to saving the world because that really wasn't fun. So
turns out that trauma is easier.
Absolutely. And being a volunteer pays better. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to remember that phrase. That is a very good phrase. Being a volunteer pays better.
Yeah. So I went off to become an international volunteer, which took me, back into the path of therapeutic work, and I was training counselors and social workers. And then I went into policy and systems and, trying to benefit more people than just the one person I could work with, which all was really good in theory. And then I went into leadership and I became the CEO of this big social services organization. And, it was all about grant management. And through all of that, there was this kind of ongoing question about whether what we were doing, what I was doing, was actually making a difference and making anybody happier. So then I went off and did a master's of evaluation and learned how to measure whether people were happier or not, and went to research and did lots of research in homelessness space. And then COVID came, and I realized that I was spending all of my time sitting at a computer looking at data spreadsheets, and I wasn't happy. And I really didn't think that I was making anyone else happy either. And I had no hobbies. I had nothing in my life that I did for my own happiness. And so, yeah, during that time, I think, like a lot of people, when you're shut inside with yourself for a long time, I took a good hard look at that and went, actually, maybe it's time to think about being happy myself for once. And I was turning 50. And so my 50th birthday present to myself was my year of clay, because my lovely partner had given me a clay course when I had had my meltdown about I have no hobbies and interests. And yeah, it was the classic, I touched the clay and went, aha, I'm home. This is it. Yeah. And the thing that really got me was that I had spent years trying not making art because I had stopped painting and I'd stopped drawing because I wanted art to be functional. I wanted, I painted a fridge once. I thought, well, maybe I can paint appliances. But I had this thing that I didn't want to just create more things that didn't have a purpose or a function. And that isn't what I really believe about art. I think it has so many, amazing contributions to the quality of people's lives. But for me at the time, I was all about the tangible. My walls are full, other people's walls are full. I don't want to just make more pictures. And I don't know why it just never occurred to me over that 20-year period that ceramics were functional art. And so, yeah, first hand building class, I sat there and went, oh my God, I can make a thing that I can use that is art and it has a purpose. Oh my God. And I kind of just never really came out of that mind blown moment. Yeah. And so just as we were starting to go back into the office post COVID lockdowns, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm taking long service leave. And that was my year of clay that I gave myself, that after, 30 years of really being very focused on working for the benefit of everyone else, that this was my time for me. And I'd been doing all this kind of thinking and journaling and drawing about what happiness means and what really makes people happy. And so I then just continued that into my ceramics and started drawing on the clay, and we went from there.
And that year of service, so because I know time-wise for everybody was a little bit different, right? Because Australia, I feel like, was locked down later in the timeline than the US, maybe not longer, but just delayed. So did you take that year off, like 21 to 22?
I'm going to have to count back on my fingers.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So it must have been 2021. Yeah.
Because 2020, everybody, you wouldn't have had to go into the office anyways at that
2020
point.
was the write-off year. So 2021 was the year that I would have taken long service leave, which was...
And unplanned for everybody who maybe missed it. You kind of, in the States, we would call it a leave of absence, effectively. You had a job to come back to, but you had been there long enough that you could say, hey, I'm going to take an extended break.
The great thing is you get paid for long service leave here. So because for the first time in my entire life, I'd actually stayed at one job long enough to earn paid long service leave. So I'd been in my last job for 8 years. And so I had enough long service leave to take it at part-time. So I was getting paid for 3 days a week for a good 6 months.
Got it.
And that's what gave me the kind of, security to be able to say, I'm just going to give myself a year because I've got enough money saved and I've got enough pay that I can eke it out. And then I started making and selling, and that all went really rapidly. And so I just, at the end of my long service leave, said, thank you very much for that leave. I'm now, not only am I not coming back, my part-time that I'd talked about easing back in, I'm actually just not coming back at all.
I love that. I love that because it's not like did you take the leave planning to start selling your work and planning to start a business? Or did you take the leave more because you needed a break, like mentally, physically?
Yeah, it was a gift to myself to have time to create. I just wanted to make stuff, and it was an amazing time. I used to get up at dawn and go down to the studio. Now I'd do morning writing, like the Artist Way morning pages. And then I would just start making, and I just made all day until I got dragged out for dinner. And it was incredible. And I think I started thinking about a market stall just because I had all, like many people, I had all this stuff that was building up. What am I going to do with it? I've given away lots. I think everyone knows the story. Everyone I know has some now. Maybe someone else would like some.
I can't actually gift this again for Christmas because that's what I gave them last year, and they were happy then, but maybe a second time or a third time in a row was really pushing my luck.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I kind of just stuck my toe in, did a market stall, went, oh, that was kind of fun, did it again, that was fun. Oh, and I sold lots, look at that, and went from there. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just laughing to myself when you describe selling as fun. Because I know from our conversations, this is what's always so interesting about all of us who communicate online together is that sometimes things get reflected back to us, right? Like you guys do this for me all of the time. And I should have probably prefaced this with like, you are a member of the community. So some of how I know this is from our like online conversations. Selling is not your favorite thing in the world. Like you would not. I don't think of you as being the extroverted person who wants to go to the market and pitch someone.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say that I do actually really enjoy going to the markets and talking to people. I don't enjoy the heavy lifting. It is challenging. I don't necessarily enjoy the selling bit of it, but I kind of think that's a very small part of it because what I love is getting to have the conversations with people about what my work means and what it means in their lives. And that's because of the nature of my work. I am not just persuading someone to buy a cup. I'm talking to them about the fact that the design on this cup is, it references cherry blossoms, for example. And that the meaning of that is that life and our experiences are very transitory. They don't last forever. They can be incredibly beautiful, but then they'll be gone. And so we really need to be very present and just appreciate the beauty of the moment while we have it. And then seeing, their faces when they go, oh, that's so true. I really needed to hear that right now. And I need to have this cup. And so those are the conversations that I usually have when I'm selling. And those conversations are fantastic.
Did you used to think of those conversations as part of selling? Or because I feel like it's a completely different way to talk about it than what we hear so many other makers talk about online, right? Like I think a lot of people think about the notion of going to a market as like, oh God, I have to try to convince someone to buy my stuff. And the way you just described it, I mean, I was like sitting back in my chair, like I'm not even holding one of your cups. And I'm just like, oh, yes, I'm physically leaning back. I'm relaxing. Like it's a completely different thing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I don't think I really thought about selling per se because I've never been in that industry. That's not, even when I was in business, I'm catering somebody's wedding. I'm not selling them food. I'm creating an experience for them. And that's very much what I do, what I focus on with the work that I make, that I'm creating an experience for people. Because the moment when they pick up that cheese platter and they spread cheese on it to share with their friends, and they look at the design and the design says, let's flow with life's tides and not be blocked by obstacles, but move gently around them. And it looks like ocean waves and water. In that moment, they kind of, I hope, whether it's conscious or unconscious, they kind of take a breath and like, okay, this is good. I can do this. So I think that has always come first for me. And then the price is the little uncomfortable bit at the end. Like, and how much should I be asking for that experience? I don't know.
So that's what I was reflecting then, because, we've had a lot of conversations around pricing lately. So I was surprised to hear you in such a relaxed way talk about loving to go to markets and tell people the stories of your work. Because I'm thinking, wait a second, we just talked about like the miserable bit of, but it's just that having to then say the number out loud or get to that very kind of tactile point of, would you like to pay with card or cash?
I think it's actually deciding on the number that's the icky bit. Because I know how much work goes into what I make, and I know how much thought, and I know that it's really unusual, and I know I'm selling an experience and something that will last a lifetime and be precious in people's lives. And I know that has value, but I still struggle to add that extra one onto the price.
Or zero on the back end.
I think we've talked a lot about remembering that we are not our customer, and I am definitely not my customer. I can't afford to buy what I make at all. I mean, I could. That's about choices. But I wouldn't easily spend the kind of money that I'm currently charging, but I also know I should probably be charging more. And so that's the bit that hurts. They're kind of going, yep, I spent 4 hours making that piece that I'm now selling you for $40. That hurts a little bit.
Yeah, because $10 an hour is not sustainable at all.
No, and it's not even $10 an hour because
Exactly.
market fees, wiring, and there's materials, and there's insurance, and all of the other things. So it's probably $5 that I'm actually making out of it.
I had this moment once within the first 5 years of my photography business where I did the math on my hourly rate, where I took one wedding and I tracked how much time I had from start to finish, from, initial email, initial phone call, all the way through, and quickly realized that I would be getting paid better as a barista and was like, okay, I need to not think about that anymore. And we're just but it also, let me correct that. Not that I need to not think about it anymore, more that I was very justified in changing my prices, because it was like, that's not sustainable. I can't pay rent and buy groceries in a major urban city on that kind of salary, let alone contribute to causes that I want to contribute to, or take a very small vacation, or skip a day of work because I'm going to go volunteer somewhere that I want to. Not even things like, I don't know, splurge on a massage, or pretty simple things that when you're traditionally employed are kind of baked into the system in terms of, oh, you get your annual review, and at that point you will then potentially get an increase in pay, or there's this opportunity for promotion, and all of that type of structure that we don't have unless we do it for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely, which I don't. That's on the to-do list for next year, but it was on the to-do list for this year. Maybe next year I'll
It's still on the list.
I've had that as a goal for a while now.
Well, that's all right. I think it's really interesting to me, though. I wonder how much both of our experiences working in direct service work has influenced this mentality also, because it's like, you've seen so many other versions of lives. You've been a part of other versions of lives very directly. And so there's this, for myself personally, for a very long time, there was a guilt around living any more comfortably, right? Because it was like, well, I don't need more. I can make it work. I'm not unhoused. On the whole, everything is okay.
The idea that we are making luxury items is one that will always make me feel a bit uncomfortable. But I think I just need to accept that discomfort is part of the doing what I do, but doing what I do makes me incredibly happy. And I also know that it does, at least in a transitory, impermanent way, make other people happy for a moment, and hopefully for more moments in their lives. And there's a lot of beauty to balance that discomfort. And maybe it is just about being aware and acknowledging that it is a privilege to be able to do what we do. It's a privilege to be able to make luxury items that people with privilege can buy, and focus on the benefits that we can have, and focus on being a good person in all parts of our lives, because this makes me really happy. And when I'm happy, I'm good for other people too.
That's what I was thinking. It's kind of the notion of putting your own oxygen mask on first, right? The thing they tell you every time you're on the plane. And I don't know how much we think about the reality of that phrase, right? If you were really faced with that position, how uncomfortable that might feel for, I don't know, a parent to do that. But in reality, you really cannot help anyone else unless you can literally breathe, in this very dramatic metaphor.
Yeah.
And how many people, I'm sure we both know, who still work in direct service and in nonprofits that are burnt out. And then what kind of level of service and experience are they giving the people that they're working with, because they're maybe exhausted or cranky or sick of it, or, insert any descriptor there that is less than happy.
Yeah. I think the breathing analogy is really good. When I'm making art, when I'm making my work, it does feel like breathing, and that is amazing. But the other side of my story that I haven't talked about is more of how I balance that for myself. my work that I make that makes me happy, that makes other people happy is actually only part of the picture because I also do a lot of, I do a lot. So I teach 1 day a week at a place called Art from the Margins, which is a centre for people who are marginalised, and I'm using air quotes. So lots of people who are receiving the National Disability Insurance Scheme funding, to people with all sorts of different disabilities and or just vulnerable and marginalised in society. So I work there teaching ceramics 1 day a week. I teach lots of workshops as well. So I've just finished a series of workshops for a deaf community group, which is interesting. I was thinking when I was doing it, I was thinking about you trying to, and the exhaustion of speaking Italian, and thinking about me running all these workshops where for 5 or 6 hours straight, I was trying to communicate in another language that I don't speak.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, but amazing as well. And people were incredibly patient with me. So yeah, I do work in deaf community. I also work in my partner's business, which is called Community, which does one-on-one art making for people with disabilities of all different kinds. So I have a couple of people that I work with each week, and we do art making for well-being and the benefit that people get out of that process. And that really feeds me in terms of that the rub of discomfort of working in an industry that is about luxury and privilege. I'm connected to still giving back and the privilege of sharing those experiences with people, whilst I'm working in the privilege of making beautiful things that people buy. So I do balance in my life, and I've been doing more and more of that recently. I'm now also doing online classes, which is great, which has kind of opened up another whole world. I do professional development for teachers who are teaching ceramics as well. I've got a 6-week program coming up in that, and I teach workshops in my studio as well.
Professional development is new. I was like, wait, hold on. Breaking news.
Yeah, that's a new one that I've just started working with a high school teacher who's wants to integrate ceramics more into her teaching. I'm hoping to develop that further too, because that's another thing that my partner does as well. He's a teacher and he works in kindies doing professional development in arts curriculum or working with art with kids.
Yeah, so you guys are both now self-employed, effectively, as a household.
Thanks, COVID.
Welcome to the wild ride.
Well, he jumped first. That was the first COVID casualty, was his full-time job as a university lecturer, because he just went, this isn't how I want to spend my life. I'm not happy if the world has gone pear-shaped, and what is it really all about? And we're all mortal and we're going to die one day. How do I want to spend my days? And it is not this. So he jumped and started Community, creative entrepreneur, small business. And then a matter of months later, I jumped too. And we looked at each other and went, oh, okay, sure, let's just do this. And we're still doing it and loving it.
That's amazing. I didn't realize it was that close. And still together also, which is equally important.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I looked around yesterday and I was sitting at my workbench carving a plate, and he was sitting at the table in the studio making a pop-up book about magic eggs that he's going to do with kindy kids tomorrow. And it's just a beautiful moment of going, look at us. And we do that all the time. Look at us. Look at this. Look at this life. This is fantastic. Yeah, it's really good.
I was just going to ask you how much you feel like life has changed for you guys, even in the pragmatic schedule of the day, or, what the days even look like, to both kind of be, I don't know what word I'm searching for here, fluid or flexible. If it was like I don't know, I am struggling to finish. We're like, I'm end of day, you're beginning of the day. Our brains are not synced. Like you had to get the caffeine to kick in for our call, and I'm like coming down off of everything. I guess what I was thinking about was that jolt of something that doesn't get talked about a lot, is that shift in going from a schedule that's dictated by someone else,
yes,
to a schedule that you have to sort out for yourself.
Yeah.
And whatever else that's involved with that. And the fact that both of you then had that at the same time.
Yeah, being self-employed, I think is probably the way of wrapping it up in one word. I think I want to say it's fabulous. It is fabulous. But I also want to acknowledge that it's hard work. And we both work really long hours. And there is no sick leave. And there is no holiday pay. And there's no anything. And we don't get health insurance as part of our employment package, but we always have to pay for our own health insurance. So there are aspects of it that are challenging, largely because there's no time to clock off. We both tend to work 7 days a week. And in my case, he's pretty good at clocking off at 5 o'clock. I tend to work until, 10:30, 11 at night. We've talked a lot about what do you do when the thing you did for fun has become the thing you do for work, and how do you then have fun, and how do you give yourself a day off? And I think that is challenging, and for the first probably 3 years, I didn't feel like I needed it because I was high on the fun and just trying to make the most of every moment. But this year, I think it's clicking into I have to actually make this sustainable, and I can't work from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, 7 days a week, all the time. I am not young anymore. And at some point, I'm going to not be able to do this quite so hard anymore. Yeah, there's a level of insecurity around that, but I do think that the payoffs are worth it. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone by any means. I think that you need to have a level of tolerance for risk to be able to do it, and a willingness to really work hard. Not that being employed is not working hard, because that's hard work too. But
No, but it's different, right? Because you have an external force saying you're required to do XYZ. And now you have to have an internal force saying, nobody knows if I do this or not. I still need to get done, even though nobody in the outside world is going to know if I do it or not, or they're not going to notice, different. Even something as pragmatic as marketing, for example, right? Nobody knows that I've set my Instagram schedule to be Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Who cares if I posted yesterday or not? But then I can kind of track that back to, okay, but I said I wanted whatever goals for the year that I said. I'm getting really pragmatic about it, but I think some of that can be really surprising, I guess, for people coming off of traditional employment of like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? Like the default is to kind of just get to spend your days making, but then it's like, okay, well, now how do I do? I'm thinking of the many subjects we have going on in the community in terms of how do I do this and what about that? And how do I do, all of these structural things we have to figure out to be able to keep doing it.
Well, I think being in the community is one of the ways that you do that, because there's someone there going, hey, what about this? Oh, right. Oh, that's right. I should be doing that, shouldn't I? Okay. So building accountability systems and building a community around you of people who are walking the walk that you're walking is really powerful in helping build some of that structure and giving you the scaffolding around a creative business. But at the same time, literally my groceries depend on me doing that. So if I don't market and I don't post on Instagram and get more followers and drive people to my website, then I'm not going to disappoint my boss. I'm going to not be able to buy groceries. And so it's kind of like, it doesn't matter if anyone knows that I've done that, because I'll get the result of it. And that kind of intrinsic motivation, I think, is much more powerful for me anyway. I'm obviously an internally motivated person. The intrinsic motivation of feeling like I can do this and I can pay my bills and I can book a holiday to Japan, those things are what drive.
Which you just did. That wasn't a hypothetical. You just did that.
Oh, yeah, and I've booked again for next year.
What? Can we skip 1 year of Japan so that we can all meet somewhere in the middle? Should we just meet in Europe? That's like a halfway point, right?
Oh, that sounds great. It's not a halfway point. It's, 28 hours away for me, but that's okay. I'm coming.
I was trying to think of something shorter than. So wait, is it easier? Is it shorter to come to the U.S.? If you were coming to the West Coast.
We could meet in Bali. That would be nice.
I'm not mad about that plan. That sounds lovely. This is actually, okay, complete aside briefly, but this is the fascinating thing about geography is that the places that sound incredibly exotic and fabulous to people in the US, and I'm stereotyping at large, but I'm guessing most Americans listening, you say Bali and it's like, oh my gosh, wow, is like Cancun for us to you. You know, like I remember when I did some nonprofit work in Fiji, which sounds like a contradiction to people in the US.
Wait, that's where I worked.
My work was in Fiji.
Yeah, we did. I photographed for a Give Clean Water. It was all about, which the huge irony, right, is that there is the Fiji water bottle brand, and yet the majority of native Fijians particularly living outside of urban areas, don't have access to clean water,
Absolutely.
let alone bottled water. But digressing, it was hilarious to me to be there to realize we happened to be there over what was seemed to be equal to Australian spring break.
Yeah.
And it's such a short flight for Australians. Yeah. Which is basically like Cancun for Americans. And I was like, oh, these places I think of as being so exotic is just because of the hours on the plane it takes to get there. Whereas if you're living somewhere else, it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah. So, hey, we can meet in Fiji if you like.
Also not mad about that plan. Oh my gosh, that would be glorious. I think that's to dream a little bit. I feel like our entire community, if we could, to figure out meetups would just be the icing on the cake. Like, it's amazing how bonded I feel to virtual relationships that, you know, so many of us for 3 years now have never met in person. And I feel like we talk more than might talk to my mom. Sorry, Mom.
Oh my God. I was actually thinking about that this morning, thinking I probably message and respond to messages in the community more reliably than I answer texts, which is weird, except it's not weird because
Fabulous.
it has, you know, the community is my office in a sense. I was thinking that one of the really hard things about giving up a career was giving up my people in that career, you know, giving up going into the office and having a cuppa over, you know, morning tea and having a chat and how was your weekend? And I love my studio, but I'm alone there a lot of the time and alone trying to work out what the hell to do next in this making a living business thingy. And so going online into somewhere like the community, and specifically the community, it just serves so many purposes in terms of making me feel like I have the break room in my day and somewhere to go to ask for help and somewhere just to hear what other people are doing and be held accountable for doing good stuff or not. And or see all the things I should be doing and am not. And that's okay because no one's judging.
Well, and part of what got us talking about having this chat on the record, quote unquote, was how I've seen you change, especially over the last year. I feel like it, for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from the outside looking in, when we had our critique with Ben Carter in the community last year, it seemed to be kind of this shifting point for you. You were at this moment of like, okay, do I figure out how to keep my work the price it is and make it more efficiently because I know I can sell it at that price? Or do I make the work that I'm really interested in making but have to learn this completely different way of selling or changing the price point or all of these other things? And to clarify for everybody that doesn't know, the critique with Ben was just a critique on our work, period. For members who want to participate, whether you've ever experienced a critique or not before, and Ben being, to my opinion, a very trusted source for knowledge when it comes to making good work, having this safe space to say like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. These are the through lines I'm seeing in what you're doing. This is, you know, what is it that you are trying to do and how can we get that voice to come out more? And I don't know if it was intentional or not. I don't know if it was coincidence, but it just seems like from then on, you have like continuously gotten more clearer and clearer and clearer on talking about your work, on getting all of these disparate things like pricing and Instagram and stuff to line up together to present this work as like, this is what you're about. To the point where as I'm talking about this, I can picture who your clients are. Like I'm all of a sudden envisioning the woman in the linen. It was the linen. I'm picturing a linen, what's the word I'm looking for now? I was going to get more specific.
Tunic. A linen tunic.
Yes, exactly. The
Yeah.
linen tunic, neutral colored linen tunic with less neutral colored bright accessories. And I was like, I've got her. Every time I see that woman at a market, I think of you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the conversations that we've had around who am I selling to and who is my audience, and therefore what voice do I need to have to reach that audience, have been really instrumental in resolving some of that discomfort that I was talking about before around where do I sit on the fence of affordable versus luxury. And so I have been doing a lot of work around that. And I've been doing a mentoring program, the Evolve mentoring program, which is very much around finding your artistic voice. But I think that critique probably was a bit of a turning point because it was the first time I think that someone professional looked at my work and said, it's good. It's got potential. You can sell that for more. And so I had been on the fence for the first while about, do I just try and get better at pumping out stuff? Because that's what I had been trying to do, just get the loads through the kiln at Christmas time, open the kiln at midnight, load them in the car and leave at 4 a.m. to go to the market. I still do that, let's be real. But there's probably fewer items in the kiln because what I chose to focus on was making less, but making it better. And keeping some aspects of my work accessible. So keeping smaller items that people can afford more easily, that are simpler. But I'm also working much more on what I think of as my capital A art range. I have a joint exhibition in April with an amazing painter. So we're working together it's called The Color of Joy, working together on a whole collection that is about how we express and experience happiness and well-being through our art making. The sources and manifestations of happiness, I think, are one of the terms that we're using. So that also is pushing me into that kind of, well, actually the decision to do that exhibition is part of that choice to start to move into more capital A art.
That's exactly, as soon as you even said you had an exhibition, I was like, I remember the discussion around, getting into galleries and how to get into gallery and I was just, it's just been such an intense year, even singularly to me, even though we've been, known each other for going on 3 years now, of just like synchronicity after synchronicity of kind of like last year felt very nerve-wracking. And this year was kind of like, oh, I forgot to say, by the way, I'm doing this. Oh, and this happened. And it's just like, it's one of those behind the scene moments for me of being able to, selfishly, it's so exciting for me, being able to see that trajectory of the things that we share in a private group that maybe people are wishing for themselves online as they're looking at people on social media. And then to actually see, for everyone to be able to actually see the timeline of, oh, this then happened. It's a year later, but it happened. And there's a lot of work that you put in between that and now to get it to happen. And what people are probably going to just see on social media is like, oh, wow, Rhianon has her own exhibition now. Gosh, I wish I could have my own. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but look at all the, like, you made it happen.
Not so long ago, I was asking how to take a photo of my work. Like, how do I photograph this cup in a way that makes it look pretty? It's a really rapid trajectory when you start saying yes to things and when you start to own your space as a creative person, I think. Of course, there's still part of me that feels like an imposter, but I'm starting to realize I'm not. I'm starting to realize that's another benefit, actually, of going to markets, I think, in terms of face-to-face selling. When you put your work up online and some anonymous name somewhere buys it, that's a nice feeling. That's great. But when you stand at a market stall and you're talking to people all day, every day, and they're saying to you, even if they don't buy it, this is beautiful. Did you make this? Oh my God, these are amazing. Like, you can't help but start to feel like maybe I can do this. And I know it's a very biased sample because 99% of the people who would say something negative don't say it. Some of them do, but there's always the 1% who go, what?
Yeah, they do.
That for this? But people are so generous in those contexts. And it's really nourishing, isn't it? To hear from people that they go out of their way to say to you, you made this and it's beautiful and you're really good at this. At some point, that's got to sink in, right? And so I would say in-person selling is really hard work, but really worth it. And I don't think I'll ever give it up completely. I would like to physically do more selling online, but emotionally and mentally and psychologically continue to do in-person selling because it's just so valuable and helps you grow as an artist. You can get that from places like the community, but you're also biased. You're not going to be mean to me. You're not going to say, actually, that piece is a bit crap. Try again.
It's a bit short.
What are you thinking? Don't sell that.
But at the same time, it is, having other people who are showing up to the markets themselves and who are dealing with, even if it is only the 1% of people going, how much for a mug? To kind of, once those people leave the booth, to be able to kind of open up your phone and be like, you won't believe what somebody just said. And having someone behind you be able to say, virtually behind you, be able to say like, yeah, I got that today too. It's okay. Keep going, and kind of giving that.
Not your people. Remember that you can't please everyone all the time. And some people are not your people, and that's okay.
We can't make enough work for all the people anyways.
No.
It's impossible.
Definitely not me.
Especially your work.
Yes. For anyone who doesn't know, my work is very intricately carved. It's hand-painted. Every piece is handmade, hand-painted, and carved in intricate detail. So one piece literally may take me 4 or 5 hours to make.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking, now my brain is just thinking about all the comments we got at this weekend's market, which is not helpful to the conversation, but they run the gamut. Let's put it that way. But it is, I do think in-person selling, for us at least, has been the fastest way to get feedback.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Now, maybe that's not always helpful because maybe you wind up at a market where you're looking around and you have a walk around the other booths and realize I'm in the wrong place, because as you've just said, not everybody is your people. And if you're at a market that attracts all the people who are not your people, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah.
But that still tells you something, that there's still information to gather from that and make different decisions the next time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to check and see here. I know we had notes, and as I thought might happen, since I embarrassingly forgot to share with the community that we were chatting, I cannot believe I did that. Jenna was online already, though, and she's got questions.
Okay.
How does she see straight with her amazing carvings? She said, but really, what kind of planning goes into your intricate designs, and why are you so kind and cool? I'll let you choose which part of that question you want to answer.
Yeah, we don't need to answer the last bit. Well, I'm kind and cool because of all the people who made me kind and cool. I grew up in a Buddhist meditation center surrounded by just beautiful people, and my family are beautiful, and, it would be impossible not to be a kind person given the life that I've lived. But the intricate designs and whether I plan them out, yes and no. I do get asked this question quite regularly. I plan themes. So I have a range of principles behind each of my design themes. And they're all obviously about happiness. So there's like the happiness of change, there's the happiness of connection to nature, the happiness of flowing with life, the happiness of possibility, so keeping a sense of possibility alive in life. And each of those has a design motif that goes with them. So I have about 20 different themes. So for example, the happiness of possibility is bubbles. So the idea is that you create concepts of all the things that could be in your life, all the possibilities, and you let them float around you like bubbles and see which ones burst into reality. And so my designs are bubbles based. And that takes all different forms. It could be, lots and lots of little tiny bubbles across a piece, or often each bubble has a unique carving within it because each possibility is different. And so I start a piece with that idea. I'm going to make a piece that's about possibility bubbles. And then that's about as far as I go in terms of the planning. So then I freehand the rest. I have color schemes that I work to, colors that I know kind of suit the vibe of the piece. So the happiness of flow is all in blues because it's all ocean, waves, flowing lines, water, wind kind of feeling. And the happiness of connection to nature is all in greens because it's all leaves. But which leaves and how those leaves move across the piece and how, whether it's simple carving or detailed carving, whether there's other colors in there, whether it's native flowers or something that I make up, those things kind of happen on the piece. So I sit down and it sounds all woo, but I hold the piece and I go, what am I going to do with you? What do you want to be? And I start going. And I wish I planned more because sometimes I sit there and go, I don't know. And the piece says, I don't know. And we look at each other for a while and then I put it aside and do something else. Yes. So the answer is yes and no. I plan the idea, the principle, the experience I want people to have from the piece. I plan the feeling that I want people to get when they hold it. And then I try and express that on the piece.
With carving, in which once you do it, you can't take it back. That's the part I can't. That's why I was always more interested in oil painting than acrylic or charcoals or watercolor, because it stays wet for long enough that I can smudge it around when I need to and make a change.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
Yeah, that's the amazing
But
part.
I don't need to take it back because I go with it. And so if I do a line and it's not where I thought it was going to be, then I make it into something else because there aren't any rights or wrongs. There aren't prototypes that I'm working to that I have to replicate. Each piece evolves in its own way. So when you let go of, oh God, that was wrong, and you go, oh, how can I use that? Then it takes all that stress away. That's a good metaphor for life, I think.
I was waiting for the dog to stop barking so I could be like, well, if that's not the perfect bow on the end of a conversation, my goodness, that was a great metaphor for life. And that I'm sitting here now very conscious of how much tension I hold in my body and thinking, I really should be applying this to my own psyche.
Yeah. I mean, I think
That's
that's
amazing.
also important. I feel like I've been very positive, and I do think it's important to say that life isn't all happiness. And no matter how many beautiful cups you hold in your hand, it's not always going to be great. And that the whole spectrum of emotional experience is important. And my latest series of work is called Without the Darkness, We Couldn't See the Light, because without the stress, we wouldn't really know how to appreciate being relaxed. And without the sadness, we wouldn't actually even notice that we were happy. So it's okay. There's no right or wrong. You can be stressed as long as you know how to let go of it when you need to.
It's maybe that part. It's like, I'm pretty sure that my hips shouldn't feel worse than my 91-year-old grandmother's.
But we do what we do, knowing it's really crappy for our bodies. We lift heavy things.
I think it's more the computer sitting that's doing it than the pots at this point,
That's
honestly.
true. Yeah,
You know?
we sit at a workbench for hours to answer Jenna's question with cross eyes, carving tiny intricate details.
Mm-hmm. Hunched over.
Yeah, I may not stare at data spreadsheets anymore, but I stare at little tiny pieces of clay.
At least you don't have the brightness, the light coming at you. It's just going at the piece. That's helpful for the screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe. I've just now ruined your beautiful philosophical end to this conversation, which felt so appropriate and for all that I know about you and what you've brought. But what is there before I let you actually start your day, because I am aware of how much time we have spent, was there something that just anything, just open-ended. Is there something we haven't talked about that you feel like you wish people knew or you want to share? Because there's also, obviously plenty of people listening, but also plenty of people in the community that aren't necessarily full-time, don't have plans to go full-time, or maybe are dreaming of being full-time. I don't know. I'm rambling now, so I'm gonna stop and let you just take it however you want to.
I think that I have to acknowledge that I love being a full-time maker and teacher and facilitator of, creative experiences. I can do that because I have the financial privilege to be able to. And not everybody has that. And that is just the reality of the world. And so it's an amazing lifestyle, but it isn't a lifestyle for everyone. It just is what it is for me. And I am old, and I feel like I've earned the position that I have in being able to do that because I've spent 30 years doing something else. I would also say that in the journey of loving being creative and making stuff and selling it, the point that I've reached today is saying that what I make matters. What we make matters because we are making the things that people invite into their homes and into their daily lives and that shape the experiences that people have in the routines of their daily lives. And that's why I make functional work. I want my work to be used and I want it to be a part of the way people live and share moments with family and friends and the mood that is created when they have their morning cup of coffee can shape the way they live their whole day. And so it might be just a cup, but it's so much more than a cup. It can be so much more than a cup if you choose the right cup for you. So what we make matters. That's what I would say.
I love that. I think we all need that reminder. 100%. Well, thank you. Thank you for figuring out our time zones together to make it work also. But before, where should people come to see these intricate designs on the internet from near and far?
I am on Instagram and Facebook as Happy Heart Ceramics, mostly Instagram. Don't put the S in after heart because you get someone else. So Happy Heart Ceramics. And my website is www.happyheartceramics.com. I have a TikTok account, but I don't use it because I'm old. And I tried. Yeah. And I'm on Threads and all those other things. But Instagram and my website, that's the place to come.
Perfect. I am embracing getting good at singular platforms and not trying to do a little bit of everything. Trying to do a little bit of everything just spreads us all too thin. As you now know, Rhianon is one of our members inside of the community. And I just wanted to take a moment now that you've heard her story directly to express how exciting it has been to watch so many makers like Rhianon grow and learn and pivot in their own exploration of what it means for them to make a living from the things we make. Together, as a community, we've gotten to watch as one member decided to completely stop making mugs as she goes full-time with her own studio practice, while at the same time another maker allowed themselves to stop stressing about doing all the things that the internet made them feel like they should be doing, because half of those things simply don't line up with the goals that they have for themselves as a side hustling potter, with no intention of ever quitting the day job. Together, as a community, we've had the privilege to show up for each other on some truly hard days, when one member's creative pursuit feels like it's abandoning them and left them questioning the desire to keep making, as well as on the celebratory days, when someone else has been recognized in a national show that they had been dreaming about for years. And while you've heard me wax poetic about my deeply held belief in the importance of a support network of peers and colleagues, lately, in part thanks to this conversation with Rhianon, there's been something else I realize we are all benefiting from by joining together in the community, myself included in this. Together, we are each getting an authentic peek behind the virtual curtain. while I might try to do that as much as possible for all of you listening here on the podcast, it can't really replicate being in almost real-time conversation together with a fellow maker like Rhianon over these last 2 years. Noticing the small shifts and sometimes even almost imperceptible adjustments each of us might make day after day, month after month, that actually lead us toward the goals that maybe a few months ago or a year ago or even 2 years ago felt practically impossible. I see it just even in the way that people talk about what they're doing or what they hope to be doing or what they're making or what they dream of, where they use words that sound impossible versus action-oriented things they're going to try and test out. Frankly, we don't get that kind of insight from each other in places online like Instagram or Facebook. And that makes sense. Those places are public. Yes, you can connect with fellow artists on those platforms, but you're also presumably trying to connect with the people who might want to buy your work, or a childhood friend, or a cousin, or your mom. So naturally, especially on the hard days, someone simply isn't going to share about this process and crazy ride of making a living from the things we make in the same way as they might when they sit down to catch up with a best friend over coffee. And it's this candid nuance that, yes, even for me, 14 years into self-employment, buoys my own energy to pursue this kind of life. It's seeing other artists and makers trust in themselves and take their own calculated risks, even if they're different from mine, that remind me on my own hard days that I can figure this out too. That it's normal for the energy to ebb and flow, for there to be good days and bad, or heck, good months and bad. Life and business isn't always a chart that goes perfectly up and to the right in a straight line, as much as I feel like that's what it's supposed to be. But instead, sometimes it might have times of exciting growth and change, and then that line might plateau, or that line might even dip down and then plateau before it starts going up again. It seems to me that the real secret to figuring out how to make a living from the things that we make is in finding the support to continue showing up. As always, I am once again rambling on about how special and necessary I find the community when I should be trying to wrap this up. So I have no segue. I will just say this, as September has shockingly arrived quite suddenly, and many of us head into holiday preparation, or at least start to hear about other makers' holiday preparations online. And maybe that creates a certain feeling of pressure or stress for ourselves, whether we're doing what other people are doing or not, or if we should be doing what other people are doing that we see on Instagram. All this to say, if you're looking for a safe place on the internet to ask questions without getting judgmental responses or random Facebook people arguing over the quote-unquote right answer, whether you think about going full-time or not, or perhaps simply want to relieve your loved ones from hearing you talk about clay all the time, come visit makersplaybook.com/community to learn more about what is happening inside this very special little slice of the internet. We would love to have you join us. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. A special thank you to the Archie Bray Foundation for sponsoring this episode of The Maker's Playbook. The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, with a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.